may have come, because it kind of complements what you guys were saying, about the healthcare situation, etc. So, as our last but not least speaker, we're going to bring this all in. We've got all of the medical knowledge, we've got the history on an African perspective. Now, let's talk now about unlawful discrimination, okay? Because as we know, your person who lives right next door to you may have come from Sierra Leone or somewhere, and now here you are talking about, I don't want to shake hands with them, or I don't want them putting a hand on the doorknob. You live in an apartment building, and so you've got these issues, and they're real to some people. So let's now hear from Alexandra, who comes from Westchester County, to talk to us. Alex graduated from the George Washington University in 2009 from the Elliott School of International Affairs. She then graduated from the New England School of Law in Boston in 2012, where she focused on international human rights law. While in law school, she interpreted for and aided in the defense of Russian refugees in their cancellation of removal hearings. She also acted as Russian liaison and drafter of an inquiry request to CEDAW, a treaty body of the UN with regard to gender rights violations in the state of Kazakhstan. She then worked at a law firm in Paris in the field of mergers and acquisitions. This past year, Alex worked with law clerk to Honorable Francis Nicolai, Supreme Court Justice, retired, and Honorable Janet C. Malone, acting Supreme Court Justice. Alex is with the Human Rights Commission for the County of Westchester. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much for having me here. As Ms. Fowler mentioned, I am the Director of Fair Housing and Investigative Counsel of the Westchester County Human Rights Commission, and I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we do first. So we work with discrimination in fair housing and also in non-housing issues such as employment, obtaining credit, and public accommodation. There are other divisions such as the New York State Division of Human Rights and the New York City Commission on Human Rights, and Ms. Fowler is the past president of the City of Yonkers Human Rights Office. And our mission statement at the Westchester County Human Rights Commission is to enforce the Westchester County's human rights law and fair housing law, engage in education and outreach to educate the public on its rights and obligations under these laws, and to promote positive racial and ethnic relations among Westchester's diverse population. We work in partnership with HUD, which is the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. And pursuant to their laws, there are protected classes under discrimination that are afforded rights. And these classes are race, color, religion, sex or gender, familial status, national origin, and disability. And pursuant to Westchester County Fair Housing Law, and also pursuant to the New York City Fair Housing Laws, we afford additional rights to those in the class of age, alienage or citizenship, ethnicity, creed, sexual orientation, marital status, victim of domestic abuse, victim of stalking, and source of income. Now, in terms of victims of Ebola discrimination who hail from West Africa, they most likely would be protected under the class of national origin, which we have seen a few cases. So in order to talk about discrimination of Ebola, it's important to talk about what discrimination deprives people of. So in terms of Ebola, it can deprive you of access to housing, access to education, access to employment, and access to medical care. And this access is how we close the gap with poverty and how we promote equality. And if you're not afforded these rights, then this is how it's perpetuated, the cycle of discrimination and the cycle of bias and stereotypes that you should be afforded under the law. And how are this discrimination perpetuated? Well, there's the notion of not in my neighborhood. So people from West Africa or people who've just come from Africa, people say, yes, they should be afforded rights, civil rights, but not in my neighborhood. They can go somewhere else. And the problem is if everyone thinks that way, then they in turn will not be afforded their rights. And then secondly, there's pushing the paranoia to extremes. So, this could be as simple as walking out of a cab from a cab driver with an African last name. Something as simple as not shaking hands with someone who you know to be from Liberia. These are things that will perpetuate the cycle of discrimination, and you're really not helping anyone by doing this because it's just based in fear and based in irrationality, not based in facts. And then there's also the notion of exacerbating previously existing stereotypes and prejudices. If someone is prejudiced against Africans or West Africans or African Americans, this is their perfect opportunity to discriminate against you as a pretext if they believe that you have Ebola or perceive you to have symptoms of Ebola. And then there are potentially laws that are overbroad and also based in fear, and this will perpetuate it on a legal standpoint. And these are things that need to change in legislation. There have been many instances of local discrimination right here in the US. For example, we have hospitals that turn patients away with Ebola symptoms. There was an instance in Virginia Hospital Center in Arlington, Virginia, where a woman was perceived as having Ebola symptoms and she was turned away and she was sent to another hospital. And Navarro College in Texas sent rejection letters to Nigerian students and cited the reason for their non-acceptance as that they weren't accepting students from countries with confirmed Ebola cases. Now, as we know, there were 20 cases in Nigeria, and it now has been determined Ebola-free by the World Health Organization. So clearly this was a discrimination case because it was not based in any fact whatsoever, but completely based in fear. And there was an instance in Pennsylvania where a Ghanaian high school soccer player was the victim of chants of Ebola by an opposing team. And parents in Mississippi pulled their children from a school when they found out that the principal had just come back from Zambia. And as we know, Zambia has nothing to do with Ebola. And then there have also been many instances on a global scale of Ebola discrimination against West Africans. So, for example, there have been approximately 30 countries, including Australia and Canada, who have placed travel bans and trade bans on affected countries. And even the World Health Organization shunned them by saying this was above and beyond the recommendations of the WHO Emergency Committee. And the problem with these types of travel bans is that these are countries, as Australia and Canada are, that are completely capable of treating patients and closing the gap and helping these patients to get well. And they have refused to afford that kind of treatment and aid. And another problem with this is that once you have a suspension of these travels and trade, there's also the suspension of other humanitarian programs. For example, if there's a refugee in Liberia who does not have Ebola, but needs political asylum or religious asylum, they cannot come to these countries. And another instance is international airlines have suspended flights since August, such as Air France and British Airways and Korea Air. Now, what about aid workers who are not from West Africa but have traveled to West Africa and were there to help the good people there from Ebola? Well, there's not a whole lot of protection because we have the national origin protected class under our laws, but they may not be a protected class. So the U.S. Department of Justice, just this past December, they came out with discrimination principles that all states and governments should follow. The first one, most importantly, being to ensure that there is no bullying, harassment, or other unlawful discrimination directed at people who are or are perceived to be from an African country of African descent, or against people who have the Ebola virus or are perceived as having the virus. So if they're not protected under the law, they can at least cite to this discrimination principles that they can have some sort of justice. And the UN Security Council, of course, has also been a great help to Ebola victims. They've expressed concern about effects of travel and trade bans on these affected countries and the isolation that results, and they have urged the continuance of the travel and trade. So why is this so important? Why are we talking about discrimination of Ebola right now? Well, because it's Ebola today and something else tomorrow. This will not just be a problem that is contained within the Ebola crisis. Already, news and media have been discussing widespread epidemic of measles that could happen as a result of Ebola, because now all the immunizations have been derailed because of the Ebola crisis, and leaving hundreds of thousands of children vulnerable to communicable diseases such as measles. So if we do not address the issue of discrimination now with Ebola, then it could be something else later, and then discrimination and people's prejudices will be completely out of control, and then even legislation won't help. And that's why it starts with us. It starts with seeing discrimination, doing something about it, standing up, as the good people are doing here today. And don't hate, don't discriminate, don't perpetuate.